They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, if this is the case, then I guess I'm more crackers than a bowl of Rice Krispies, because after my last two Resident Evil videos were somewhat less than successful, I am back once again with my satirical and very politically incorrect humour to offer my analysis on the DLC/extra bits in the Resident Evil series. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not all doom and gloom, because out of those 10 people that watched my last video on Resident Evil Revelations, I am convinced that one of those was Jeff Bezos, because every fucking time I go on Amazon, I get these rather raunchy canvas arts recommended to me. Now, just because I played the Resident Evil 4 remake does not mean I want to buy one of these things. So fucking listen up, Bezos. If you think you can manipulate money out of me with a pair of tits, then you've got another thing. Holy shit, Jill, where's my credit card? Add to cart. Okay, excellent. Where was I? Oh yeah, Resident Evil DLC and extra bits. Let's get on with it. If the Resident Evil 2 remake, being arguably one of the best games of the generation, and certainly in the series, wasn't enough, we also got some free DLC to go with it. And while none of it is likely to blow you away, it is certainly worth a playthrough. At the risk of looking a gift horse in the mouth, though, I do wish these stories were more connected to the main narrative like I feel they could have been, instead of taking place in some sort of alternate reality. Also inhibiting Ghost Survivors from being as good as some of Resident Evil's other DLC is that it focuses mainly on combat, which was actually the weakest aspect of the main game. That being said though, the Ghost Survivors does have some mechanical additions to differentiate it from the main game, such as coin machines and backpacks which you can get items out of, and these not only add replayability but add a tactical element to playing through Ghost Survivors, because when it comes to the coin machines you can only take one item out, and looting some of the backpacks can be quite risky. On top of that, we also get some new enemy types in these poisonous zombies, which again adds another tactical element to Ghost Survivors, because you have to find different ways to get round them, because if you kill them too close they will poison you, and they will also poison you if bitten, so you can't just YOLO past them and med afterwards if you don't have a blue herb on you. Catherine Warren's story is a perfect example of one which could have been connected to the main canon, and while it is good to see it in better shape than we last saw it in the main game, it would have been interesting to see how she ended up dead on Chief Hines' table, and the closest thing to reality we get in a scenario is all these comatose looking fuckers on this bus, which reminds me of all those gold card cunts getting on the bus pretending to be disabled. Nevertheless, Catherine Warren's story starts out in the worst way possible, because some of the first enemies she encounters are the most evil, most despicable, most horrific things known to mankind. White specimens. Don't worry though, things do pick up later on, because I for one was rather glad to see Lickers occupying this basketball court, because fuck me, it could have been a lot worse, and at least these Lickers didn't try to steal my fucking wallet. And for those of you who were offended by that admittedly slow-burning joke, hear me out. If I control 100% of Catherine Warren's movements, and Catherine Warren is 50% of Elizabeth Warren, who is part native, then if my maths is correct, which it most certainly is, then I am 85% Native American, so don't be a fucking racist and leave this video a like. Next up is gun shop owner Robert Kendo, and not only has the remake series got much more mileage out of this character after he made an appearance in RE3 remake as well, but he's a vast improvement over the creepy pedo that he was in the original Resident Evil 2.
Ooh, sorry about that, babe. I thought you were one of them.
What's going on in this town?
Hold on. I ain't got no clue, darling.
From a gameplay perspective, Kendo's episode plays out like the other Ghost Survivors, but unlike their playthroughs, his has two different pathways which you can take to complete the scenario, and this just adds a little more replay value, on top of that added by the mechanical additions which I mentioned earlier. It's from a narrative perspective, however, where I felt that Kendo's episode could have done a little bit more, as out of all the Ghost survivors, he had the most weighty and substantial involvement in the main game, with his young daughter being infected with the T-virus, which I felt made an excellent basis to create a compelling new story from. But No Time to Mourn picks up in the aftermath of Kendo's daughter's death, and then proceeds to play out like the other episodes. Next up is The Forgotten Soldier, and so forgotten is he, when I referred to my notes to record this section of the video, there was absolutely nothing there. No, seriously, that's it, I got nothing. For me though, the pick of the Ghost Survivor episodes is the 4th Survivor, which sees you playing as Hunk. No, that is not what I mean. Fucking pretty boy, whose scenario is helped significantly by him having more weapons to play with, and a large portion of it taking place in the police station, which is not only one of the most iconic locations in the series, but in video games in general. No Way Out is easily the most challenging of the Ghost Survivor scenarios, and just to put into context how difficult this can be, I only actually completed this for the first time while compiling footage for this video, almost 5 years after getting the Platinum Trophy in the main game. While having a sheriff shoot a never-ending wave of zombies in a small gas station may at first seem like the least plausible scenario of the Ghost Survivors, I feel it has the strongest connection to reality, acting as a Black Friday simulator, cause some of the cunts in here go absolutely fucking nuts. This one guy in particular either really wanted that discounted toilet cleaner, or took exception to me using the term Black Friday. Alright, fine, I admit it, I may have said the N-word. I saw him over by the ice cream freezer and suggested that he should eat something healthy. I should have known that under no circumstance whatsoever can you say the word nutritional to a fucking fatty. This guy was not pleased with me at all. I have often wondered what a modern day over-the-shoulder remake of the original Resident Evil would look like, but having played Lost in Nightmares, I no longer have to bother, because as soon as you walk through the front door of the mansion, you can turn left into this large dining hall, go upstairs on this opulent branching staircase and overlook said dining hall, or turn to your immediate right and go along this corridor with the bright red carpet. You even have to open certain doors by playing the fucking piano, and I could swear I've seen this shit somewhere before, and I'm convinced the architect who designed this mansion gets more work in video games than fucking Troy Baker does. It's not just the aesthetics that have a very old school Resident Evil feel to them, and while Lost in Nightmares is mechanically identical to the main game, it focuses much more on atmosphere than action, with much fewer and tougher encounters, and I must say I did enjoy the change of pace, and I really enjoyed this DLC. Fortunately, Lost in Nightmares also sees us returning to the United States, and I no longer have to go around shooting lots and lots of Africans like I did in the main game, and thank fuck for that, because now the only time I have to listen to a cunt shouting, "Hands up, don't shoot at me," is when Jill ties my wrist to the bed and starts cowgirling me. I did leave my DNA all over the fucking scene though.
What the fuck?
After completing the game as Chris, which took me around an hour and a quarter to do so, you'll unlock the ability to play as Jill. And unlike in the original Resident Evil, her playthrough is actually more difficult than Chris's, with enemies appearing in locations that they didn't previously. This is further compounded by once again being saddled with Chris as a partner, who continues to be as incompetent as he was back in the Spencer Mansion.
You sure know how to keep a girl waiting.
This would never ever fucking happen if I was Jill's partner though, because I always come quick to Jill.
Fucking gross.
From a narrative perspective, Lost in Nightmares is the same old Resident Evil story, with evil people performing human experiments on unwilling victims. Do not panic though, this Ken that I found in their list of victims is not your wonderful narrator. In fact, the only mutation that I have undergone in my lifetime is between my legs, if you know what I mean. Jill, tell them.
What? Keep dreaming.
Also included in RE5's DLC is Desperate Escape, and unlike Lost in Nightmares, is far more comparable to the main game in that it focuses much more on action, and if you like the main game, then there's a very good chance you'll like this as well. To account for this much more action-focused gameplay, Desperate Escape's environments are far more holistic and open than those in Lost in Nightmares, and they don't just better compute with the action component of the gameplay, but the co-op one as well, unlike in Lost in Nightmares, because while those narrow and claustrophobic corridors are perfect for survival horror, they don't really account for two people on screen, and that game at times could feel really cluttered. Desperate Escape picks up from the scene in the main game where Chris and Sheva part ways with Jill after saving her from her mind control device, and then we see the rest of events unfold from Jill's perspective. And bizarrely, even after just having a conversation with Chris where she tells him to go on without her,
I'm gonna be alright. You do need to stop him.
We can't just leave you here.
You have to. This is your only chance.
we spend the rest of Desperate Escape trying to catch up with him again. Desperate Escape sees you partnered up with Josh, who you may remember from the main game. Or, on second thought, well, maybe not. And I, for one, don't like this guy's agenda because he's clearly trying to make a move on Jill.
You got room for one more?
There's always room for a beautiful lady.
I bet you say that to all the girls.
Just the pretty ones. Come on, let's go.
Please don't, because I don't fancy my chances all that much in a cock-blocking battle with this dickhead. You know exactly what I mean. So overall, while RE5's DLC offers up two vastly different experiences, they are still both very enjoyable and worth some of your time, and even if you are someone who disliked the more action-focused main game, you still may enjoy Lost in Nightmares, which was much more a callback to classic old-school Resident Evil. Out of Resident Evil 6's multiple DLCs, all but one of them is online, and this is useless to me, because the only time I am online is for reasons I would rather not admit to, not to play Resident Evil games, and any accusation that there is any crossover whatsoever between the two, yes Joe, I am looking at you, it is fucking absurd, because I have never in my life engaged in a piece of Resident Evil, or in particular Jill Valentine related pornography. The one piece of offline DLC in RE6 is the Mercenaries, and this is a problem for two reasons. A, I'm not much of a fan of this mode, and B, as the game likes to tell me, I'm pretty shit at it. So why aren't I much of a fan of Resident Evil's Mercenaries mode? Well, for a start, you're perpetually running against the clock, and I always feel there's more tasks to do than time to accomplish them in. And this reminds me of my old job, which I despise with a deep, burning, visceral hatred, and I will never ever go back there, even if they relocate here, which, as I think about it, if you break down phonetically, is Jill in Ham, which 100% has nothing to do with what I do on a Saturday night.
Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me.
No, that definitely does not ring a bell with me at all. No, nothing. Because the only place I'm going is Jill Sandwichville, and I cannot make my point any clearer than that on why, what was I saying? How did I get so off topic? Not only are you constantly agonising over the timer, but you're also going to have to keep a keen eye on your combo meter as well, which will quickly reset to 0 if you don't start linking kills together, and this is really annoying because you can't always find any fucker to shoot. And while ammunition is certainly not scarce, it's not all that abundant either, and then on top of this is the core mechanical problems that Resident Evil 6 has, such as having to scroll laterally through your entire weapon inventory to find the weapon you want, something I brought up in my original Resident Evil video. Of course, there are many reasons why Resident Evil 6 is so low on this list, and one of those is the god-awful weapon wheel. Instead of being able to assign a particular gun to a button on the D-pad, you'll now have to scroll laterally through your entire weapon inventory to find the one that you want. And to make matters worse, some of the weapons, particularly the machine gun and the sniper rifle, are difficult to differentiate from one another, and in the heat of battle, you'll constantly find yourself equipping the wrong weapon. And when you add all these things together, it's not just the Mercenaries mode here in Resident Evil 6, but across the series as well, which I have just simply never had all that much fun with. Individually, Resident Evil 7's 8 pieces of DLC are all a lot of fun in their own unique way, and collectively, they make up the most comprehensive DLC package in the series. They also fill in some gaps in the story, albeit at times inconsistently. The DLC with the most tangible connection to the main game would be Daughters. Preceding the events of the main game, you play as Zoe and we get to find out how the Bakers got infected with Evelyn's mold. And seeing them here as a normal family, going about their everyday lives, makes their story in the main game all that more tragic. But that's not to say their world wasn't a little bit crackers before Evelyn showed up. The ship that she washed ashore on is being reported on the news, even though the Connections transportation of Evelyn was supposed to be a clandestine operation. But I suppose if the news in this world is anything like that back in reality, it's not worth paying much attention to anyway, and the Bakers keep their bread in the fridge. Pass. I don't know. While Daughters is never anything more than a walking simulator, it was still an enjoyable experience even to someone like me who likes a little more game in their video game, because it has the presence of mind to not outstay its welcome, and this won't take you all that long to complete. That being said, however, you are going to have to play through twice if you want a true ending, and I recommend that you do, because we get to find out how Zoe knew how to cure the mold in the main game, something she'd never encountered before, and we also find out that Mia is not much for male feminists. You did spell simp wrong though. The DLC also reveals the fate of Ghost Hunter Clancy, and we find out that this poor fucker was really put through the ringer by the Bakers in admittedly 3 superb games where I probably had more fun than Clancy did. First up is Lucas, who hosts Clancy in a game of 21, an ultra addictive and genuinely tactical card game derived from blackjack. There's 11 cards in the deck numbered from 1 to 11, and the rest are trump cards, which are things like doubling opponent's bet and drawing a specific card from the deck. The winner is the one closest to 21, and I'm surprised that Capcom has not capitalised on just how much fun this card game is by making it into an actual physical release. Probably don't include the chopping off of fingers and the degenerate psychopathic host though.
Use this one, and you'll need a partner to jerk you off.
Well, says the cunt with the password protected laptop. You'll also have to escape Marguerite's bedroom in this fantastic escape room style scenario, and one thing to bear in mind while you're looking around the room looking for items and clues to escape it is that not only will Marguerite intermittently come in and out of the room, but she doesn't miss a fucking trick either. So if you've not put everything back to where it was before, she will notice and then you're screwed. The last of the Clancy scenarios is Nightmare, and while I'm not saying it's better than the other two, it certainly is more mechanically complex, because not only does it incorporate the decision making of 21 and bedroom, but combat as well. Nightmare is all about finding the best way to survive using the scrap dropped from these metal compactors, at which point you're going to have to decide where you're going to invest it. Is it going to be in something more short term like a shotgun or a grenade launcher, or are you going to buy the corrosive acid and unlock certain doors around the environments, which not only grant you access to larger areas which makes dodging enemies easier, but more metal compactors as well, or alternatively you could use it on the turrets and traps lying around the environment. Wherever you choose to distribute your scrap to though, you best choose wisely, because not only are there 0 item pickups here in Nightmare, but the prices of ammunition and setting off traps and turrets goes up the more you use them, things you will desperately need as the game progresses, because it eventually tasks you with killing everything in the area, and after you have done that, you will have to kill a boss figure such as Jack. As much as I enjoyed Nightmare though, I did have some criticisms while playing it. Starting with how I feel the game is purposely designed to make you grind it out, because the more you play Nightmare, the more items become available to you, items which were not available to you the first time you played the game, which obviously makes it much easier. The lickers in the game are ultra aggressive as well, and not only can they jump round corners to hit you, they do a shit ton of damage in the process. Some of the other fodder enemies are far too fucking tanky as well, with some of them taking 4 shotgun shells to the head to kill, which also brings me back to my previous point, because I felt like the game was leaving me purposely impotent, so I grind the game out to get the better shotgun. Picking up at the immediate conclusion of the main game is Not a Hero, and while Not a Hero is a solid piece of DLC, it's far from a spectacular one, and certainly not aided by a questionable character redesign of main protagonist Chris Redfield, who is also accompanied by a completely lifeless voiceover performance. Being the first piece of DLC to be released for Resident Evil 7, it's not all that much of a surprise that Not a Hero is much more an extension of the main game in comparison to the other DLCs, with its "this door's locked, go find the fucking key" level design, mixed in with some first person shooting. Not a Hero sees Chris hot on the heels of Lucas, who he never directly confronted in the main game. But not only do we get to kill Lucas here, but we find out much more about his association with the Connections and the happenings that instigated the events of Resident Evil 7. Over the last 25 years, I have been more than willing to suspend my disbelief over some of the stupid shit the series has thrown at me. But the fact that Umbrella, a recognised terrorist organisation in series lore, is not only back without even bothering changing their name, but has managed to endear themselves to the public by reformulating as a PMC, good luck with that, is a little bit of a fucking stretch. Even the fucking IRA had the decency to change their name, and after all, you are not the ANC, a bunch of African communists, so you never get away with that shit. Coinciding with the final part of the main game, End of Zoe is the final piece of canon DLC. That being said though, when I first booted it up, I was originally unsure of what I got myself into, because not only do some of the characters sound like they're auditioning for the next Fast and Furious movie.
See that girl back there? Look! That there my brother's little girl. My niece, you understand? And around here, family is a righteous cause.
But look like they got lost searching for Final Fantasy as well. Evelyn's mole is even sentient enough to cover up Zoe's chest, so in the race to find the most annoying malevolent force which insists women are as covered up as possible, it gets the bronze medal. End of Zoe sees you playing as Joe Baker, who is the brother of Jack from the main game, and it's not just his very caveman-like demeanour, which makes me think he's been living under a rock, because he seems totally oblivious to events that were happening at the time.
Where in all hell did this wall come from?
And he also totally ignored the advice of that guy who was wandering around in the red hat for 4 years. Remember, Joe, must avoid giant alligators. To be fair to Joe though, I was equally oblivious in November 2020 when those cunts were going around advocating for No Nut November, because you can fuck off with that. I blame Jill.
Fuck you.
Throughout End of Zoe, Joe is tasked with two primary goals: find the serum and cure Zoe of the mold, and ward off this Swamp Thing looking monster, who, spoiler alert, is Jack, even though he clearly calcified and died in the main game. And if the main game's plot not having a fucking meltdown if you choose to save Zoe wasn't indication enough, End of Zoe proves that saving Mia is the canon option. Though the melee combat here is rather simplistic, left trigger for left punch and right trigger for right punch, it's still actually a lot of fun, and the game doesn't solely confine you to melee combat, because you can craft bombs and throw harpoons as well, and then later on in the game Joe gets access to a mechanical glove which vastly augments his punching strength, and the only complaint I have about this thing is they don't make one for your right hand, because, well, I have my reasons. There's an irony in the fact that the game that brought survival horror back to Resident Evil has what is quite possibly the silliest piece of extra content in the entire series with Jack's 55th birthday. The premise here is quite simple. Jack is hungry and you have to feed him. You do this by looking around his house to find food and then bringing it back to him. Here's the problem. There's a shit ton of mold traversing his house who are all trying to kill you. And Jack's 55th birthday is almost like Resident Evil 7's version of Mercenaries, because you're always running against the clock, and killing more enemies will give you more time, and there are also ways to augment combat, such as finding special weapons lying around the environments. Okay, what we got here? Ethan must die. Ethan will wish he had his mummy as you lead him to his death over and over again in this ultra high difficulty minigame. Please, I've been playing Resident Evil for 25 years, this will be fucking piss easy. Oh, fuck off! Shadows of Rose is an excellent piece of additional content to Resident Evil Village, which focuses more on horror and atmosphere over combat and exploration like the main game did, and I for one had a good time with it. Shadows of Rose is helped several-fold by Capcom making the prudent decision to not turn their main protagonist Rose into an insufferable girl boss, because after all, if you thrive rather than survive in your environment, then it's hard to exist in a horror atmosphere, which is probably where we get the term, survival horror from. Rose is not just a perfect main character for the tone of game she finds herself in, but she's a genuinely likeable and dynamic one as well, and personally I found a more compelling main character than her father Ethan. You see, Rose is tormented by the powers she inherited from her father, and Shadows of Rose sees her trying to rid herself of those afflictions. Rose feels fear, she feels sorrow, and you can really resonate and get behind her, and it was a nice change of pace to play as a main character that I actually liked. Shadows of Rose is also helped by its awesome environments, starting with the castle, which was my favourite part of the main game. If I'm being honest though, it's not quite the same without Lady D and her writer's 3 daughters roaming around trying to kill me all the time. And even though they only made up a small part of the main game, they left a lasting impression with their abundant charisma and instantly memorable catchphrases.
You stupid man thing! Move your hands! Don't make me angry! Put those arms down!
Which made them some of the best video game characters of recent times. The game does throw you a little bit of a bone, however, because you get to return to Lady Dimitrescu's bedroom, and oh my life, so many memories, because this is where Lady D found out how hung I was after sucking on me. I mean, literally, she got 3 doors to impale my hands with hooks and hung me from the ceiling. After sucking on my blood as well. Shadows of Rose also sees us returning to House Beneviento, and like in the main game, it strips away all weapons and is ostensibly an escape room style puzzle box with psychological horror overtones. And while I did really enjoy this section, it's a segment which loses its impact with every subsequent playthrough when you know where everything is and what else is coming. And if you are somebody who is looking to get multiple playthroughs out of the DLC, it could potentially have diminishing returns for you. Take it from someone who attempts to speedrun the main game, and as awesome as House Beneviento was the first time I went through it, with each passing you slowly accrue indifference towards this section, which eventually gives way to tedium. And is that information relevant to this video? No it isn't. Did I bring it up as a shameful plug for my world record speedrun, which nobody watched? Yes I did. Fortunately, Shadows of Rose does not have us returning to Moreau's dank reservoir, as he was the worst of the main game sub-baddies, and even though this fucking psychopath wears a crown made up of the bones of his victims, it's come to my attention that some people not only like, but resonate with this twat as well. But given the current times we live in, this doesn't really surprise me all that much. You see, with his disgusting tentacle-looking things, which Wikipedia inform me are baubles, no, not barbells, that would be ridiculous, he doesn't have the look or charisma that the other lords possess, and he is the least favoured of Miranda's subordinates. But instead of doing anything to change that, he mopes around his reservoir bitching and whining, expecting to be the next diversity pick. This cheeky bastard even goes around identifying as being the best.
All of the bros!
Something he clearly is not. And then to top all of this off, this cunt even thinks it's a good idea to mutilate people. In fact, when I was snooping around his lair, I'm pretty sure I found Bruce Jenner's missing dick. So overall, Shadows of Rose is a very worthy purchase for those of you who like old school survival horror, ominous and atmospheric environments, and playing as a likeable and compelling main protagonist. Also included in the DLC package is the option to play through the main game in third person, and while this does offer up some new animations, it really doesn't change the experience all that much, but I suppose if anything it'll give you a good excuse to go back and play the main game, which is actually a lot of fun. And while playing in third person doesn't even reveal the identity of Ethan's face, we do find out that he dyes his hair with bleach blonde streaks like he's in a fucking 90s boy band, and he will wander around his house wearing a raincoat, which is weird even to me, an Englishman who has been forced to acclimate to a lot of rain. Rounding out the winter's expansion pack is some new content to Mercenaries Mode Additional Orders, and to further compile my pre-existing indifference towards Mercenaries is the fact that the one here in Resident Evil Village is probably the worst one in the series, and just to further highlight how meh I find this mode, this one trophy in Mercenaries precluded me from getting the Platinum Trophy in the main game, because after you complete half the stages, the game makes you play through them again, this time using only the pistol, and this was not fun for me at all. But that doesn't mean this mode is entirely devoid of merit, because you can use these very Devil May Cry looking blue orbs to augment things like damage output, movement speed and maximum health, and the mode also incorporates the progression systems from the main game, which just means you have multiple ways to cater your playthrough to your preferred style, and if you're a fan of Mercenaries mode, you may enjoy this more than I did. The astute among you will have noticed that this video has so far proceeded in numerical order, but I have saved RE4 for last because its DLC Separate Ways is not only Resident Evil's best, but we have two versions of it to compare, one in the original and one in the remake. Though the original RE4 is pushing 20 years old now, there's still a lot to like about Separate Ways. Ada's outfit is still one of the coolest in video game history, and we are treated to the serenading tones of Sally Cahill behind the character, who was, and still is, the best and definitive version of this character. Ada was also far much nicer to me than Jill was.
That's a large thing you have there.
And so impressed was Ada with me that the game initially tasks you to ring Ada's bell. Wait, no, sorry, you have to ring the bell as Ada, excuse me. I can't possibly think how I got those two things mixed up. It does defy belief, however, that both Ada and Leon are wandering around the village at the same time at the beginning of the game, but I can certainly buy this as canon, because for those of you who have ever attempted to speedrun the remake on the highest difficulty will know very well that you need all the fucking help that you can get in this section. But while the original Separate Ways is still an excellent game, like I said, it's one that's nearly 20 years old now. The movement and controls are clunky as fuck, and not only can you not move and shoot at the same time, but you'll have to go in and out of your inventory to swap weapons, which takes all the fluidity out of an otherwise excellent combat system. The remake version of Separate Ways is utterly fantastic as well, because like in the main game, you get all the punchy and addictive combat, the satisfying progression systems which makes exploration fun and rewarding, and then on top of this some totally killer boss fights, and at just £8, Separate Ways is an absolute steal. I'll give the game credit as well for reanimating all the cutscenes so we can see events play out from Ada's perspective, because after all it could have been lazy and just simply inserted the cutscenes from the main game. As much as I do adore this game though, it doesn't make me blind to all its flaws, which it has also adopted from the main game. The guns don't shoot straight, making shooting down medallions like some sort of rigged carnival game, the menuing is really unresponsive, and the climbing is fucking awful and totally inconsistent. And whoever designed this banister in particular should get a job along the Mexican border, because at times this fucking thing is impossible to get over. But then again, I'm not exactly known for my judgment when climbing over things.
Yeah, I can't get that.
Oh, you're shitting me. I thought there was a fucking platform there. Also, whether you're playing as either Leon or Ada, your character has this really annoying tendency where they don't automatically unholster their weapon after you've interacted or climbed over something, and you'll find yourself walking into combat encounters without a weapon equipped. And while you can press the square button to unholster the weapon, if the weapon is not fully reloaded, you will start reloading it instead of equipping it. And if you don't already suffer with the crippling gaming disorder reload OCD, this fucking game will give it to you, and you eventually conclude that the easiest way to equip the weapon that you want is to equip the weapon that you don't want, then to equip the weapon that you do want, and it's as stupid as it sounds. The remake does make some changes both narratively and from a gameplay perspective over the original, with some of the biggest ones being both Lewis and Wesker now being far more involved in Ada's story, which does bring up the question that if Wesker is so omnipotent like he is in the remake, why doesn't he just get the fucking amber himself? Ada is also now infected with the Plaga herself, and we will spend a large portion of Separate Ways trying to rid ourselves of it. Also here in the remake, it's now Ada who has to shoot her way past the gondola section, navigate her way past the boulders and evade the lasers in the laser passage. She also has to take on Passanta, who is now a persistent foe of hers here in the remake, all of which were part of Leon's story back in the original. But that's not to say the remake is averse to trimming some of the fat. Those annoying QTE moments from the original are now gone, and unlike in the original, Ada has zero association with Krauser, and she is no longer the one who has to kill him off for good. When he dies in the main game, he dies for good, which was probably a wise decision, because the game makes a pretty big deal out of Leon having to kill his mentor, and this poignant moment loses all its impact if Krauser doesn't actually die here. Though I did offer up some criticisms of the RE4 remake, they were more nitpicks than anything else, so my only outright criticism of Separate Ways was the same one that I had for the main game: the changes to Ada's character and the performance of their new voice actress, Lily Gao, and I do apologise if I pronounce your name wrong. You see, on top of Ada's awesome aesthetic design, she's a really intriguing character. She's charming and charismatic, she's seductive and mysterious, and you never really know where her allegiances truly lie. And an integral part of bringing those characteristics to life has been the performance of the voice actress, which is simply not present here in the Resident Evil 4 remake. It's not just that Lily Gao can't pull off the Ada 1 character, she can't pull off her own interpretation of it either. And if we compare the RE4 remake's version of Ada to the one in RE2, I personally never felt that voice actress Jolene Anderson managed to nail the definitive Ada, but it was still a decent and likeable character, and whether you like the character or not, it would be hard to deny that her voiceover performance was anything short of excellent. A perfect example of just how poor this voiceover performance can be is when the game tasks you with finding 3 items to make a suppressant for the Plaga, which Ada is infected with. Ada makes her way to the bindery, and the only emotion she conveys in the next line is one of boredom.
Alright, first, bindery.
The Resident Evil series has seen many faces come and go, many different variants of zombie virus, but there's been one constant through it all, and that's the relationship between Leon and Ada. And while personally they care for each other, professionally they often find themselves on opposite sides of the coin, and many of their interactions devolve into them playfully pointing guns or knives at each other, and I can't think of a scene which perfectly typifies their relationship, a scene which was vastly superior in the original than this one.
Put your hands where I can see them.
Sorry, but following a lady's lead just isn't my style.
Put them up now.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Leon. Long time no see.
Ada. So it is true.
True? About what?
You, working with Wesker.
I see you've been doing your homework.
Why, Ada?
What's it to you?
Why are you here? Why'd you show up like this?
See you around.
Ada!
You can stop right there, Leon. Wouldn't make me use this, would you?
Well, after 6 years, that is one hell of a greeting, Ada.
You don't seem surprised. Interesting.
Try using knives next time. Better for close encounters.
Not a bad move. Very smooth.
So who are you working for this time?
Oh, Leon. You know I don't work and tell. Leave the girl. She's lost no matter what. You walk away now, and who knows? Maybe you'll live to meet me again. And then I might get you that greeting you were looking for.
You think I'm gonna give up that easy?
Right. How about we continue this discussion another time? See you around, Leon.
There's practically none of this on offer here in the remake. We don't even get this scene from the original, and while it does involve Leon strangling Ada, it has far more charm to it than anything in the remake. To be fair, some of these issues have not been helped by the changes to the story. You see, Ada has always been Leon's guardian angel and has always been one step ahead of him. She threw him the rocket launcher at the end of RE2, she helps him out in RE6, and she even bails him out here in the RE4 remake. But the scene from the original where Ada rescues Leon during the knife fight with Krauser has now been switched from Ada to Louis, making their relationship even more distant. However, this doesn't excuse the fact that when Leon and Ada are on screen together, there's not a deal of chemistry between them and the scenes are totally lackluster. Ada is further hampered by having a lot of dialogue with Luis, and while Luis is a watered down version of a now long cancelled character, he is still ultra charismatic here in the remake and just further highlights what a charisma vacuum Ada is.
Then come, Sancho Panza. Let us rescue the Princess Dulcinea.
You're gonna hurt yourself.
Hey, that was my lance.
But that's not to say the remake gets everything wrong with Ada's character, and there are still elements here of why she's such an awesome character. This scene at the beginning of the game where she goes beast mode on the Black Robe is simply sensational, and this moment where she goes all Clint Eastwood on El Gigante is pure badass, and reminiscent of one of my other favourite moments in the series, the ending of the original RE3 where Jill kills Nemesis for good.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
RE4 Remake also includes a Mercenaries mode, and like the Ghost Survivors in the RE2 Remake, it was a free piece of DLC, and an absolutely excellent one at that. And while I did say earlier that I'm normally indifferent to Mercenaries, that's because they're not usually this chaotic, and oh my god, so much fun. The basic premise here is the same as it's always been, kill shit and, well, rack up combos, but you don't have to worry about running out of ammo or enemies to shoot here, because the game will throw wave after wave at you, with the odd tougher enemies such as Red Zealots or Gyarados. Killing things here though is not simply about racking up the combos, because it will also fill up your mayhem meter, which is basically this game's version of Devil Trigger, which will increase the amount of damage you do, quicken up your reload speed, and when it comes to certain characters like Wesker, you can unleash a devastating melee attack. However, I can totally see how long-time fans of the Mercenaries might not be too hot on this iteration of it. One shot to the head with the pistol will stun an enemy, and the follow-up melee attack will often be enough to kill it. You don't really have to worry about ammo or resources, and while I thoroughly enjoyed this more frenetic pace, I can totally understand if you're someone who didn't, and much preferred the older installments. Well, that's it. That's your lot. I think we covered all bases there, and I just want to say thank you for joining me and Jill for the past 45 minutes or so.
Not your partner.
You know what, Jill? You've been nothing but abusive to me for this entire video, and I'm not putting up with it anymore.
Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me?
Oh, yeah. Course I was kidding, Jill. I would never say anything like that to you. You're the boss. You're the boss. Fucking bitch.
I'm going after him.
Ah! I've got to go. I'll see you all next time. Bye.